He swore he loved me until I showed him the pregnancy test. That's when he walked away, leaving me young, scared, and carrying his child alone. Years later, when fate brought him back into my life, the tables had turned. And this time, I wasn't the helpless girl he abandoned. I was the woman who made him pay. He broke me once, but now I was strong enough to break him forever. Daniel wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the man I thought I'd spend forever with. He had a smile that could light up a room, words that could make you believe in anything, and dreams that seemed so real when he described them. We started dating when I was just a teenager. I fell for him hard, blindly trusting every promise he made. Late-night drives, whispered secrets, and talks about marriage and kids. I believed it all. But the illusion shattered the day I showed him that positive pregnancy test. Instead of joy, his face twisted with anger. "Claire, I'm not ready for this. Don't pin your mistake on me." His words cut deeper than any knife. He walked out that very night, blocked my calls, spread rumors that I was trapping him. And just like that, the man I loved turned me into nothing but a burden in his eyes. His family followed his lead. They acted like I was invisible, even cruel. One time, his mother looked me in the eye and said, "Girls like you ruin men's lives." At just 19, I was left alone in a tiny, damp apartment, working 2 jobs to afford rent and cheap meals. Nights were long. I often cried myself to sleep, clutching my belly, terrified of the future. But every time I felt my baby kick, I knew I couldn't give up. I wasn't just living for me anymore. I was living for us. So I made a promise in the dark of those lonely nights. I'll survive. I'll fight. And one day, Daniel will regret every tear he made me shed. He thought he had erased me from his life, but the truth was, I was only getting started. Raising a child alone at 19 wasn't just hard, it was brutal. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, nights cleaning offices, and still barely managed rent for a damp 1-bedroom apartment where the paint peeled from the walls. Some nights, I skipped meals so my baby could have enough formula. Other nights, I sat on the bathroom floor, crying silently, afraid my daughter would one day ask me why her father wasn't there. But then I'd look into her tiny eyes, and everything changed. She was my reason, my anchor, my strength. Every dirty look from people who judged me, every cruel whisper that I was just another teenage mistake, fueled me. I refused to let my daughter grow up thinking her life was a tragedy. I enrolled in night classes, studied during my lunch breaks, and built connections with people who believed in me. It wasn't easy. I failed more times than I can count, but every failure pushed me harder. Meanwhile, Daniel? Rumors trickled in. He jumped from one dead-end job to another. His charm wasn't enough anymore. He was reckless, irresponsible, and always looking for shortcuts. But I didn't care. I stopped checking. I stopped hoping he'd ever apologize. Because my focus was on building something greater, for me and my daughter. Years passed. I earned my degree. I climbed from an entry-level position to managing projects at a rising company. Soon, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And yet, deep down, I carried the memory of that 19-year-old girl crying in a bathroom. The betrayal never left me. It became the fire that drove me. Because one day, I knew Daniel would cross paths with me again. And on that day, I wouldn't be the broken girl he abandoned. I'd be the woman holding all the power. He left me to sink, but I learned how to swim with sharks. And when he drowned in his own failures, I was the one waiting at the shore. Years passed. My little girl was now in middle school, full of life and laughter. She was everything Daniel had thrown away, yet everything I lived for. By this time, I had moved into a better neighborhood, bought a reliable car, and even started saving for her college. My job had grown into a career, and eventually, I launched my own small business. What started as a risk turned into a success story that people admired. I had rebuilt myself from nothing. No, more than rebuilt. I had elevated. But then, fate decided to test me. One evening, while attending a networking event downtown, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. Smooth, confident, and all too familiar. Daniel. He was there. Older, but not wiser. His once sharp suit was wrinkled, his confidence felt forced, and his eyes darted nervously like a man desperate for opportunity. When our eyes met, he froze. I saw recognition flicker. For a brief second, I wondered if guilt would flash across his face. But instead, he smiled, like we were old friends. Claire? Wow, look at you. You've changed so much. I wanted to laugh. Changed? No. I had transformed. I kept my composure, my smile polite but cold. Inside, every memory of that 19-year-old girl crying alone came flooding back. But this time, I wasn't broken. I was in control. He talked about how life hadn't gone as planned, how he was trying to get back on his feet. He mentioned he was looking for investors for a big project he was working on. I listened silently, realizing the truth. Daniel was drowning. And for the first time, I had the power to decide whether he sank or swam. He thought he'd run into an old flame, but what he really ran into was his reckoning. I didn't show Daniel my anger. Not yet. Instead, I smiled politely, the way any professional woman would. I let him talk, let him weave his desperate lies about a huge business opportunity that only needed a little financial support. He didn't know it, but every word he spoke was digging him deeper. The old Claire, the girl he abandoned, might have cried, begged, or demanded answers. But this Claire had learned the art of patience. I pretended to be interested. I asked him questions about his venture, nodding at all the right moments, letting him believe I was impressed. And he bought it. Completely. For the next few weeks, Daniel called me, texted me, even asked to meet for coffee. He spoke about starting fresh and hinted at making up for the past. But I wasn't blind. This wasn't love. This wasn't guilt. This was desperation. He was broke. His so-called project was falling apart, and he needed me, the very woman he once abandoned, to save him. Every time he spoke, every time he smiled, I remembered the girl I used to be. The girl who cried in a run-down apartment, pregnant and abandoned. The girl who begged for help and got silence instead. And with each memory, my plan sharpened. I would help him. Oh, I'd help him just enough. I'd let him believe I was his lifeline. And then, when he least expected it, I'd cut the rope. He thought he'd found his savior, but what he really found was the woman who'd been waiting years to watch him fall. Daniel had no idea who he was dealing with. He sat across from me in cafes, pitching half-baked ideas, pretending to be ambitious, pretending he still had that charm that once fooled me. But I could see through it all. His eyes no longer held confidence, just desperation. His words weren't bold dreams anymore. They were empty promises from a man who had run out of chances. And still, I smiled. I let him believe I was considering investing in his business. I even invited him to my office once. My office, in a company I built from nothing. I watched his jaw drop as he stepped into the polished lobby, the receptionist greeting me with respect, employees nodding as I passed. He couldn't hide the shock in his voice. Claire, I didn't know you'd become this successful. I simply shrugged. Well, you learn to survive when you don't have anyone to rely on. The look in his eyes, just for a second, was priceless. Regret. Maybe even shame. But mostly fear. Over the next few weeks, I strung him along. I asked for proposals, requested documents, and scheduled meetings. Each time, I watched him get more comfortable, more confident that I was his golden ticket out of failure. He started calling me late at night, not for romance, but to beg. His words dripped with fake charm, the same charm that once blinded me. But this time, I wasn't blind. This time, I was in control. And as I tucked my daughter into bed at night, I whispered to myself, "He left me alone in my darkest hour. Now, I'll leave him stranded when he thinks salvation is in his hands." I was patient, precise, because revenge wasn't about striking fast. It was about letting him climb high enough so that when I pulled the ground from under him, the fall would destroy him completely. He thought I was building him a future, but I was only building his coffin. The day of Daniel's big presentation finally came. He had begged me for weeks, convinced I was ready to invest in his so-called project. He showed up in a borrowed suit, sweaty palms gripping his cheap briefcase, his fake confidence plastered across his face. I had set the stage perfectly. The conference room was full. Executives, potential investors, my legal advisor, even a few journalists I had quietly invited. Daniel thought they were here to witness his brilliance, but they were really here to witness his downfall. He stood at the front of the room, stumbling through slides filled with copied material and numbers that made no sense. I let him talk, let him dig his own grave with every desperate word. The audience grew restless, unimpressed, even amused. When he finally finished, he turned to me with that old smile, the one that once melted my heart. "So, Claire, shall we make this official?" I leaned back in my chair, calm, powerful, untouchable. "Official? Daniel, the only thing official here is your failure." Gasps filled the room. I slid a folder across the table, evidence I had gathered. Proof of his lies, his debts, the scams he had tried to pull on others. Pages and pages that exposed the man he truly was. His face drained of color as the investors flipped through the documents. One by one, they closed their folders and left, disgusted. The journalists scribbled notes eagerly, already smelling a story. Daniel's voice cracked. "Claire, please, you don't have to do this." I stood, towering over him, my voice steady and sharp. "You didn't have to leave me, pregnant and helpless. But you did. You made your choice years ago, and today I'm making mine." He collapsed into his chair, defeated. His world crumbled in that room, while mine only rose higher. For the first time in years, I felt free. He abandoned me when I needed him most, but in the end, I was the one who decided how his story ended. Weeks after Daniel's downfall, life finally felt lighter. 4 years, I carried the weight of betrayal, the sting of abandonment. But now, that weight was gone. One evening, I came home to my daughter's laughter filling the house. She was growing into a strong, confident young woman, the kind of person I had always dreamed she'd be. We sat together on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. She leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." And in that quiet moment, I realized the truth. My revenge wasn't just about Daniel. It was about reclaiming myself, proving that I was more than the girl he left behind. Daniel was nothing more than a ghost of the past now. His downfall was complete, and my life was just beginning. He thought he left me broken forever, but all he really did was create the woman strong enough to destroy him. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Tales for more stories where betrayal meets payback.